The first alert came in at 4:17 in the morning, and I remember the exact time because I had just poured coffee into the same chipped Boise State mug I'd been using for 6 years, and the digital clock on the microwave in the break room clicked over the second I heard the tone. Long tone, then a shorter one. Then the sector display on my primary scope did something I had never seen it do in 11 years of working long-range radar for the FAA. It cleared. Not a glitch. Not a sweep artifact, not the kind of momentary drop you get when a transmitter hiccups and repaints on the next rotation. The whole scope went from the usual quiet 4 a.m. picture, a couple of red eyes off Salt Lake, a UPS Heavy climbing out of Boise, a life flight helicopter squawking VFR up near McCall, to nothing. No targets, no weather returns, no ground clutter suppression bleed. Just the pale green wash of the display and the sweep line moving through empty air like a lighthouse in a fog with no ships. I sat there with the coffee steaming under my chin, and I said out loud, to nobody, "That's not right." The site I ran was a long-range air route surveillance radar out past Kuna, about 40 minutes southwest of Boise on a stretch of BLM land that nobody drives to unless they're hunting jackrabbits or lost. Officially, it was a joint-use ARSR-4, one of the big white golf balls you sometimes see from a highway and mistake for a water tower. Unofficially, it was my second home. I was the on-site tech, one of two, and my partner on the alternating shift was a woman named Della Reyes, who had a 2-year-old and a husband who taught math at Meridian High. My name is Wes Karcher. I was 43 years old that autumn, divorced 8 years, no kids, a brother in Reno. I called on birthdays. The site itself sat on a low rise of sagebrush and cheatgrass, fenced in chain link with the standard federal signage. Inside the fence was the radom, the equipment building, a backup generator shack, a fuel tank on a concrete pad, a gravel parking area, and a single-wide trailer that had been there since the 90s, where the on-shift tech could sleep or eat or hide from the wind. The wind out there was a full-time co-worker. It came off the OIHs in a straight line, and it never quit. My job was simple to describe and complicated to do. Keep the radar turning. Keep the data flowing to the Salt Lake ARTCC and the Boise Trecken. Keep the transmitters cool, the klystrons within spec, the backup power ready, the comms up, the logs current, and the site secure. If something broke, I fixed it or I called the contractor in Denver. If the weather went bad, I stayed on site. If the phones went down, I used the microwave link. If the microwave link went down, I used the satellite phone. If the satellite phone went down, I used my personal cell. If my personal cell went down, I drove into Kuna. That morning, I did not yet know that every single one of those lines was going to fail. At 4:17, the scope went blank. At 4:18, I had already crossed the equipment room and was pulling the maintenance printout. My first assumption was that we'd taken a hit somewhere in the RF chain. It happens. You get a bad connector, a moisture intrusion, a fried preamp, and suddenly your returns look like the sky just swept itself clean. I ran the built-in test. Every subsystem reported green. Transmitter forward power nominal, reflected power nominal, antenna rotation nominal, receiver noise floor nominal. The radar was working. There was just nothing to see. I picked up the direct line to Salt Lake Center. It rang twice, which was already odd because that line was supposed to be answered inside of one, and then the controller on the other end picked up with a voice that sounded like she had been talking to a lot of people already. Kuna, Salt Lake. Salt Lake, this is Karcher at the site. My scope is showing me an empty sector. I've run diagnostics. The radar's healthy. I'm not seeing any traffic at all. Are you receiving my data feed? There was a pause. Not a technical pause. A human pause. The kind where somebody on the other end is deciding what to tell you. Wes, we're receiving your feed. It's clean. It's just there's no traffic to paint. Say again. There's nothing up there right now, Wes. We've been holding departures for about 40 minutes. The airborne traffic in your sector diverted or landed. Boise's closed. Mountain Home's closed. Twin Falls is closed. Everything west of us is on the ground or heading to it. I stood there with the phone against my ear and looked through the small window over the console. The east was starting to come up grey-blue behind the Boise front. The white radome outside was turning slow and steady the way it had turned every minute of every day for as long as I'd worked there. Inside the building, the transmitters hummed the way they always hummed. It sounded like a refrigerator the size of a garage. "What's going on?" I said. "We don't have clean information yet. There's a directive from Washington. Ground stop nationwide. That's all I can tell you." "Nationwide?" "Nationwide." "Since when?" "Since about 03:30 local. Wes, listen, keep your sight up. Don't leave. If your feed drops, we lose situational awareness for that whole corner. We may need you longer than a normal shift. Do you have Della coming in?" "She's on at 8. Try to reach her. Tell her to be ready either way." I said I would. She hung up. I stood there holding the phone until the tone came back, and then I set it down slowly, like it might break. And I walked back to the scope and I watched the sweep make one full rotation across a completely empty sky. There are a handful of moments in a person's career where the shape of the day changes without any dramatic sign, and you only recognize it later. That was one of them. Not a bang, not an alarm. Just a woman in Salt Lake telling me the word nationwide in a tone that meant she'd already said it 8 times that hour. I called Della. It went to voicemail. I left a short message and said to call me back regardless of the time. Then I called the site supervisor in Seattle. It rang, and then a recorded voice told me the mailbox was full. That was the second small thing that morning that shouldn't have happened. Ted Bevins had a habit of clearing his voicemail obsessively. I'd never once, in 6 years, gotten a full mailbox message from him. The third small thing was the fuel truck. We got a fuel delivery on the 3rd Wednesday of every month, regular as a mortgage payment, diesel for the backup generator, propane for the trailer. It was Tuesday. There should not have been a fuel truck anywhere near the road that runs past the site. But when I stepped outside at about 5:30 to walk a perimeter and clear my head, I saw a set of taillights out on the 2-lane, moving slow and steady toward Grandview. Big vehicle, trailer behind it, the shape of a tanker. I watched it until it disappeared behind the rise. Then I walked back inside and I checked the delivery schedule on the corkboard. No delivery scheduled. I picked up the site radio and I called out to the vendor frequency on the off chance somebody was monitoring. Nobody answered. I went back to the scope. Still empty. Somewhere around 6, the phone started ringing in a way I hadn't heard before. The direct line rang. The site line rang. My personal cell rang. 3 different calls in the span of 2 minutes, all from numbers I didn't recognize. The first was a man from the FAA regional office in Renton who wanted to confirm the site was manned. He sounded tired. He said the phrase, national continuity posture, twice, and I did not know what that phrase meant. He told me not to leave the site under any circumstances until I received a specific, authenticated stand-down order. He gave me a code word to expect. The code word was shorebird. He made me repeat it. Then he hung up. The second call was from a woman who identified herself as being with the Idaho Office of Emergency Management. She wanted to know if I had potable water on site, how many days of food, and whether the generator fuel was topped off. I answered the questions honestly. 90 gallons of water in the tank, about 6 days of MREs and canned goods in the trailer, diesel at roughly 70%. She thanked me. She did not tell me why she was asking. The third call was Della. "Wes, what the hell is going on?" I told her what I knew, which was almost nothing. She was quiet on the other end for a long time. I could hear her daughter in the background, that high, sleepy talking 2-year-olds do at dawn. "Wes, they're saying on the radio not to travel." Ada County just put out something. Ryan's school is closed. I don't know if I can get to the site. Don't try. Stay with them. I've got the shift. You can't run a 24. I've run a 24 before. Not alone. Not with the phones like this. Della, stay home. I mean it. She didn't argue as hard as she should have, which told me she'd already made the decision before she called. She told me she'd try to check in every 2 hours. She told me to eat. She told me to sleep in shifts. She told me she loved me, which was a thing co-workers say sometimes in Idaho without meaning it romantically. And then she hung up. I ate a granola bar standing over the sink. I refilled the coffee. I sat down at the console and I made a decision that I would repeat 100 times over the next 3 weeks. I decided to do my job. The radar turned, the sweep painted. There was nothing to paint. At about 8 in the morning, the sky lightened enough to make out the Oahes to the south and the low haze to the west toward the Snake River Plain. I stepped outside again to look. There is a particular sound that Idaho makes in the early morning, a sound of nothing at all. No cars on the 2-lane, no cattle, no combines. Just the wind through the sagebrush and the far-off cry of a hawk. That morning the sound was almost right. Almost. What was different was the sky. On a normal morning I would see 2 or 3 contrails already, high jets crossing east or west. Sometimes a dozen. Boise's traffic funnel came right over our sector and the sky was always striped with white. There were no contrails. I stood outside for a long time and I looked up at a sky that had been washed clean. I want to be honest about something. I'm telling this the way I remember it, and my memory is not perfect. I have gone back and looked at my logs, and there are places where the logs and my memory disagree, and I have chosen the log where they disagree because paper doesn't lie the way people do. But there are also things the log doesn't record. It doesn't record what I was thinking. It doesn't record the way my hands felt on the console. It doesn't record the smell of the coffee going stale in the pot because I forgot to make a fresh one. So I'll do my best. I'll tell you when I'm guessing. By 9, the microwave link to Salt Lake started degrading. It didn't go down, it just started throwing bit error rates that were an order of magnitude higher than normal. That could mean a lot of things. A repeater upset, atmospheric ducting, interference. I logged it. I called Salt Lake on the phone line, which was still up, and let them know. The controller on shift now was a man named Peters, whose voice I knew from 100 routine calls. He sounded strange, not scared, concentrated. Wes, we're seeing degradation on several of our long-haul links right now. Not just yours. We think it's a cascading commercial fiber issue. A TNT is not returning our calls. If your microwave drops, we'll switch to the S8 backup. SAT backup goes through the same commercial carrier. Yeah, we know. We're working on it. Just keep the radar turning. I said I would. I always said I would. Around 10, I saw the second vehicle. It came up the access road, which was a private gravel spur off the 2-lane, and it was not a vehicle I recognized. A dark blue SUV. Government plates, but not the pattern I was used to. It pulled up to the outer gate and stopped, and a man got out. He was wearing a windbreaker and slacks. He looked like he'd been driving all night. He walked up to the gate and he pressed the intercom. "Kuna radar," I said into the speaker. "Mr. Karcher, my name is Alan Doss. I'm with the Department of Homeland Security, Boise Field Office. I'd like to come in and speak with you. Do you have credentials?" He held up an ID to the camera. It looked real. I couldn't verify it from where I was. Everything about the situation told me to keep the gate closed until I could verify. Everything about the morning told me that verification was going to be difficult. "Mr. Doss, I need to make a phone call before I let you in. Give me 2 minutes." "Take your time," he said. "It's cold out here." He didn't sound annoyed. He sounded like a man who had already been through this exchange several times already that morning. I called Salt Lake. Peters answered on the first ring. I told him I had a Homeland Security agent at the gate named Alan Doss, and I wanted to know if he was expected. Peters put me on hold. When he came back, he said, "Wes, we don't have a name on our list, but I can tell you that DHS is doing physical checks on critical infrastructure sites across the region. It's a coordinated thing. If his ID looks legitimate, let him in, but watch him, and Wes call me back after he's inside." I opened the gate. Alan Doss walked into my equipment building at 10:22 on a Tuesday morning and shook my hand with a firm, dry grip, and did not ask for coffee, even though he clearly wanted some. He was in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, wire glasses. He looked like a math teacher who'd taken a wrong turn. He set a folder down on the console and he looked at the empty scope and he said, "That's what we thought. What did you think?" "That everything's on the ground." "Everything's on the ground here. Salt Lake says everything's on the ground west of the Rockies." "Everything's on the ground everywhere, Mr. Karcher." I asked him to say that again. He did. He said it slowly, like he was doing me a courtesy. "Every commercial aircraft in the continental United States is either on the ground or heading to one, as of about 3 hours ago. There is also a general ground stop that has been extended internationally, where our partners can enforce it. The FAA has not issued a public reason yet. Do you know the reason? I know some of it, not all of it, and I'm not authorized to tell you what I know." He said it without apology, the way an accountant tells you the tax code is what it is. "Then why are you here, Mr. Doss?" He looked at me for a long time before he answered. "Because your site is on a list, Mr. Karcher, and I need to walk it. And I need to look at your generators and your fuel and your comms redundancies, and I need to know how long you can stay operational without external support. And then I need to leave, because I have 4 more sites to visit today, and my day started at midnight." I walked him through everything. He was thorough. He looked at the fuel gauge. He looked at the generator hours. He looked at the water tank. He looked at the food supply in the trailer. He looked at the ammunition in the small locker by the door, which contained a shotgun I had never fired and a box of shells for scaring off coyotes. He wrote everything down in a small pocket notebook with a mechanical pencil. "How long can you run without a fuel delivery?" he asked. "On generator alone? About 3 weeks. If I ration and only run at night, 6 weeks. How long can you run without external comms?" "The radar, indefinitely. It doesn't need me to talk to anybody. It needs power and a working transmitter. The data feed to Salt Lake needs the microwave or the SAT. If both go, the radar is still turning, but nobody sees the data." "Is there any way to store the data locally?" "Yes. There's a solid-state recorder that captures every sweep. Rolling 72-hour buffer. If I dump it periodically to the archive drive, I can hold about 6 weeks of continuous data." "Do that," he said. "Dump it every 12 hours. Don't overwrite the archive." Am I allowed to ask why? He closed his notebook. He put the pencil back in his shirt pocket. He looked at me the way somebody looks at a person they're about to ask a favor from that they know is unreasonable. "Mr. Karcher, in a situation like this, we may lose the ability to reconstruct events. The radar tapes are one of the few objective records of what was in the sky and what wasn't. If somebody someday needs to know what happened, they'll want your data. Save it. Don't lose it." "Something happened in the sky." "Something happened," he said. "That's all I can say." He shook my hand again. He walked out. His SUV crunched down the gravel and turned onto the 2-lane, and I watched him drive north until he was gone. I locked the gate behind him. I went back inside. I sat at the console, and I looked at the empty sweep, and I thought about the phrase, "if somebody someday needs to know what happened." I dumped the buffer to the archive drive. Then I called Salt Lake and told them Doss had come and gone. Peters said thanks. He said the microwave was still degrading. He said if I lost him, to keep recording and to try again on the hour. I lost him at 1:12 in the afternoon. The microwave dropped first, then the satellite backup dropped. Then the landline gave me a tone I had not heard in years, which was the fast busy. That means the switch itself is overloaded. My personal cell had one bar. I dialed Della. It rang once and cut off. I dialed my brother in Reno. Same, I dialed Peter's direct. Same. I sat there and I did the thing you're trained to do, which is to write it down. Time. Systems affected. Actions taken. I wrote it in the paper log because the electronic one might not survive. My handwriting is not good. It got worse as the afternoon went on. At 2:15 the power dropped and the generator kicked in on its automatic transfer. The transfer was clean. The radar didn't blink. I went out to the generator shack and I looked at the transfer log and everything was nominal. I walked around the outside of the equipment building and I looked south toward the Oahes and I saw a column of smoke rising from somewhere in the direction of the Snake River. Thin. Steady. Not a wildfire. A structure fire, maybe, or a vehicle fire. It was too far away to tell. I went back inside. I sat at the console for a long time. I made a list on a yellow legal pad. The list had 2 columns. The left column said stay. The right column said go. I filled in both columns honestly. Stay, the radar, the data, the federal directive, the code word I was waiting for, the fuel, the food, the water, the shotgun, the fact that Doss had told me the tapes might be the only record, the fact that Della was safer with her family than she would be at the site, the fact that I did not know what was on the roads, the fact that the site was defensible in a way that a Ford Ranger on a 2-lane was not. Go. My brother. The column of smoke. The silence on the phone. The 2-year-old whose father taught math. The fact that no code word was coming. The fact that a man from DHS had said if somebody someday, which is a phrase that presumes there might not be a somebody or a someday. I looked at the list. I folded it in a half. I put it in my shirt pocket. I stayed. That was Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, the fast busy was gone. Instead, when I picked up the landline, there was only silence. Not a dead line. Silence. Like the switch was still there, but had stopped answering. My cell had no bars. The microwave link status page showed a red X where the far end used to be. The satellite modem cycled through its handshake sequence every 30 seconds and failed every time. The radar turned. The sweep painted. There was nothing to paint. I stepped outside at first light and walked the perimeter. The wind had died overnight, which was unusual. Everything was very quiet. I heard a coyote yip somewhere out in the sage and then nothing again. I looked up at the sky. Clear. No contrails, no aircraft, not even the little Cessnas that usually buzz around the Snake River plain at dawn. I did something I would do many times over the coming days. I stood outside and I listened. Sometimes, if you listen long enough in a place like that, you can hear the interstate. It's a low, steady sound, almost below hearing, like a river. That morning, I could not hear the interstate. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, and I did not hear a single engine anywhere in any direction. I went back inside and I made a fresh pot of coffee. I ate 2 eggs from the small refrigerator in the trailer. They would be my last fresh eggs for a while. I ate them slowly. I read the label on the coffee bag because it was there, and my brain wanted something to do that was not thinking about the sky. Around 10, the propane heater in the trailer clicked off and did not click back on. I went outside and checked the tank. It was 3/4 full. The regulator was frozen. I thawed it with a rag and hot water from the electric kettle in the equipment building. It came back on. I made a note on the log. Around noon, a truck came up the access road. It was a beat-up F250 red with a topper on the bed and a spare tire strapped to the side. I did not recognize it. I put down the wrench I was holding and I walked to the fence. The truck stopped at the outer gate. The driver put his hands out the window without being asked. He was a man in his 60s, in a canvas jacket with a gray beard trimmed close to his jaw. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. Name's Roy Lindquist. I ranch about 8 miles east of you. I saw your generator running last night and I figured somebody was still here. What can I do for you, Mr. Lindquist? My wife's got the sugar. She was on a delivery from the pharmacy in Boise for her insulin. Delivery didn't come Monday. I drove into Kuna yesterday. The pharmacy's closed. The Rite Aid's closed. The Albertsons is closed, and there's a note on the door that says, "Come back Friday." I tried to call my daughter in Nampa, and I can't get through. Her husband's a paramedic. I figured if anybody's got a working phone out here, it'd be the federal government. I looked at him for a long moment. I looked at the truck. I looked at the way he was sitting with his hands visible. I opened the gate. "My phones aren't working either," I said. "But come in. Let's see what we can figure out." He drove the truck up to the parking area, and he got out slow. He was favoring his right knee. He shook my hand. His hand was rough and cold and clean. He told me his wife's name was Marlene and that she'd been on insulin for 19 years and that they had 5 days of it left, maybe 6 if she cut her doses. I brought him inside. I made him coffee. I showed him the phones. The landline was silent. The satellite modem still cycled and failed. My cell had no bars. "Well," he said, and he sipped the coffee, and he did not say anything else for a while. I asked him what he'd seen in town. He told me. Kuna was mostly empty. Some houses still had cars in the driveway, but nobody outside. He said he'd seen 2 National Guard vehicles on the interstate on Monday morning going west, but he hadn't seen anything since. He said the traffic light at the main intersection was still working, but there were no cars for it to direct. He said the elementary school parking lot had about 12 cars in it, and he didn't know what that meant. He said he'd seen smoke to the west, near Nampa. A lot of smoke. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be straight with me," he said. "Do you know what happened?" "No," I said. "I don't." "Government man come out here?" "Yes, yesterday." "He didn't tell me either." Roy nodded slow, like this confirmed something he'd already decided. "My wife thinks it was a bug," he said. "Something in the water. She's been watching the news. Before the news went off, there was something coming out of the coast, is what she said. She said San Francisco was on the news Sunday night and Portland Sunday morning, and then nothing." "I didn't see the news," I said. "I was on shift." "Well, that's what she said." We sat in the equipment room and drank coffee and listened to the radar turn. He asked me what the radar was for. I told him. He asked how I could tell if a plane was in the sky. I explained. He asked how I could tell if there weren't. I told him that the absence of a target was almost as informative as its presence. He liked that. He said his father had been an air traffic controller in the Navy in Korea, and that he'd said something similar once about listening for the silence between the radio calls. Before he left, I did something I later thought about a lot. I gave him one of the 2 working handheld radios from the site. I set it to a private frequency. I told him to check in every morning at 8 and every evening at 8, and if I was on site, I would answer. If I didn't answer, he was to try again in an hour, and if I still didn't answer, he was to assume I had left and he could come and take whatever fuel and food he could carry, and I meant it. I wrote the frequency on a piece of paper, and I made him repeat it. He took the radio. He put it in his jacket pocket. He shook my hand again. He said, "You're a decent man, Karcher." "I don't know about that." "I do." He drove away east on the 2-lane, and I watched him go until he was a red dot, and then a speck, and then nothing. Then I locked the gate. Then I went back inside, and I sat at the console, and I looked at the empty sweep, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time, which was the particular loneliness of being the only person on a piece of ground. That night, I slept in the trailer, with the door bolted and the shotgun on the little table beside the bed. I did not load it. I did not want it loaded. I wanted it to be a symbol, not a tool. I slept in 3-hour stretches. Every 3 hours, I got up and walked to the equipment building and checked the radar and dumped the buffer to the archive drive. Wednesday night, I heard something that I could not explain. I was walking from the trailer to the equipment building at about 2 in the morning, and I heard, from somewhere high up and to the west, a sound like a jet, not the roar of a commercial engine at altitude. Something higher pitched, fast, moving from northwest to southeast. I stopped on the gravel and I looked up. I saw a light. One light. Moving very fast against the stars. Not the blinking red anti-collision light of a commercial jet. Steady white. I watched it cross the sky in maybe 40 seconds and disappear behind the eastern ridge. I ran inside and I looked at the scope. Nothing. Whatever it was either below my radar horizon by then, or it was not painting for reasons I could not guess. Military aircraft can suppress their returns in various ways. So can other things. I logged it in the paper book. Time, direction, sound description, duration. I wrote unidentified aircraft, high, fast, single steady light, not painting on scope. I underlined not painting on scope because I wanted my future self to remember that detail. I did not sleep well the rest of that night. Thursday morning, Roy came up on the radio at 8 sharp. Karcher, Lindquist. Roy, go ahead. Marlene's stable. I found a neighbor with insulin and he shared. He's got a diabetic dog and it's the same stuff. I'm going to owe him a calf. Glad to hear it. You hear anything last night? I hesitated. Then I told him. He was quiet for a long time. I heard it too, he said. From the porch. Marlene woke me up. She said it sounded like the 80s. The 80s. F-15s out of Mountain Home. They used to run drills over our place. She said it sounded like that, but there wasn't any of the roar, just the whine. Yeah. Somebody's still flying, Karcher. Somebody is. But not on your scope. No. We talked for another minute. He signed off. I sat with that for the rest of the morning. Somebody was still flying, and they were not appearing on a radar that was working perfectly, which meant either they were flying below my radar horizon the whole time, which was possible on the eastern approach but hard to sustain, or they were flying in a way that my radar was designed not to see. Or my radar was seeing them, and someone had told the data feed to strip them out. Except my data feed wasn't going anywhere anymore, because Salt Lake was dark. I checked the local recorder. I pulled the archive drive. I ran the playback for the previous night, focused on the time frame I had heard the aircraft. The recorder showed nothing. No target, no suppressed return, no artifact, clean sky, which is when I realized something I did not want to realize. The local recorder was showing me what the data feed was showing Salt Lake, which was what the processed signal was showing after everything upstream had had its chance to touch it. If somebody had inserted a filter between the receiver and the recorder, I would never know from looking at the recording. I went into the equipment room and I opened the receiver cabinet. I traced the signal path with a schematic and a flashlight. I checked every cable, every connector, every module. I found nothing that looked wrong. That did not mean nothing was wrong. It meant that whatever might be wrong was subtle enough that a mid-level tech with a flashlight was not going to find it in an afternoon. I sat on the concrete floor of the equipment room with the schematic across my knees, and I said out loud, "Well, Karcher, that's interesting." I said things out loud a lot in those days. It kept the room from feeling empty. Thursday afternoon, the wind came back. It came out of the west, and it built through the afternoon until it was steady at maybe 30 knots with gusts that shook the trailer. The radome doesn't care about wind. It's built for it, but the wind carried something with it. Around 4, I stepped outside and I smelled smoke. Not close. Not the sharp smoke of a fire nearby, the faint, distant smell of a fire hundreds of miles away. It was a familiar smell to anybody who lived in the West through the last few summers. Wildfire smoke. But it was November, and the moisture had been decent this fall. There should not have been a wildfire big enough to smell from here. I climbed the small ladder up to the top of the equipment building and I looked west. The horizon over the Owyhees had a brown haze that had not been there in the morning. It stretched from the north almost to the south. I stayed up there for a long time. The wind pulled at my jacket. I could hear the radome turning below me, the low, steady grind of the pedestal drive, faithful as a heartbeat. I climbed down and I logged the smoke. Thursday evening at 8, Roy did not come up on the radio. I waited. I called for him. Nothing. I waited an hour. I called again. Nothing. I set the handheld on the console next to the scope and I paced. This was not part of the plan. The plan was he checked in twice a day. If he didn't, he was supposed to be in trouble or on his way to being in trouble. I did not have a way to reach him except by driving. I looked at the fuel in the Ranger. 3/4 tank. Kuna was 38 miles round trip. Roy's ranch was 16 miles round trip. I had never been to Roy's ranch. He had told me it was 8 miles east on the 2-lane and then 2 miles north on a gravel spur past a broken windmill. I stared at the stay/go list I had made on Tuesday. It was still in my pocket, folded. I took it out and I looked at it. I did not add anything to it. I put it back in my pocket. I decided to wait until morning. I did not sleep at all Thursday night. I sat at the console and I watched the sweep and I listened to the wind and I listened for the radio. Around 3 the wind died again, the way it had died Tuesday night, and the silence came back. Around 4 I heard the high whine again, this time from south to north, fast and high, and I looked up through the small window and I did not see any lights. I logged it anyway. Time and direction and description. At 6 in the morning, I fueled up the Ranger from the site's small motor pool tank, which I was not technically authorized to do, and I loaded the shotgun and put it on the passenger seat pointed at the floor. I locked every gate. I set the radar to its normal cycle. I dumped the buffer to the archive drive, and I pulled the drive and I put it in a small waterproof case, and I put the case in the pocket of my jacket. Whatever else happened that day, the drive was going with me. I drove east on the 2-lane. The 2-lane was empty. I mean, empty in a way that a road in Idaho is never empty, even at 6 in the morning. No ranch trucks, no school buses, no commuters, no cattle haulers. Nothing. The sky was gray and the smoke smell was stronger and the wind was picking up again from the west. I passed one thing on that drive that I still think about. A car pulled over on the shoulder about 4 miles east of the site. A gray sedan, doors closed, nobody inside, nobody visible around it, no flat tire, no hood up. The keys were in the ignition. I stopped and I looked in through the driver window. There was a coffee in the cup holder, still upright, half full. There was a woman's purse on the passenger seat. There was a phone on the dash. There was no note. There was no sign of struggle. I stood there for a long time. I did not open the door. I did not touch anything. I said quietly, "Ma'am, I hope you're all right wherever you are." Then I got back in the Ranger and I kept driving east. I found the broken windmill. I turned north on the gravel. I drove past a cattle guard and up a low rise, and I saw the ranch house at the top of it, a low white house with a green metal roof and a wraparound porch and a barn behind it, and a big propane tank on a concrete pad. Roy's F-250 was parked in front of the house. There was no smoke from the chimney. The porch light was on. I parked at the bottom of the drive. I got out with the shotgun broken open over my forearm, the way you carry a gun when you don't want to scare anybody. I walked up the drive slowly. I called Roy's name. He came out onto the porch before I got to the steps. He was in the same canvas jacket. He looked worse than he had 2 days ago. His face was drawn. His eyes were red. "Karcher," he said, "you shouldn't have come. You didn't check in. Marlene passed last night." I stopped at the bottom of the steps. I closed the shotgun and I set the safety, and I leaned it against the porch railing. "Roy," I'm so sorry. It wasn't the sugar. It was something else. She'd been running a fever for 2 days, and I hadn't said anything to you because I didn't want to worry you. Yesterday afternoon, she couldn't keep water down. Last night, she went to sleep, and she didn't wake up. I did not know what to say. I stood at the bottom of the steps, and I looked at him. I don't want you to come inside, he said. Okay. I'm not sick, I don't think. But I don't know, and I'm not going to be the man who took a decent radar tech down with him. Okay. He sat down on the top step. He put his hands on his knees. He looked out across the yard toward the barn. I need your help with one thing, he said. Anything. I need to bury her. The ground's not frozen yet. I've got a backhoe in the barn. I need somebody to know where, in case somebody comes looking someday, in case her sister ever gets word. I helped him. I stayed outside. He did the digging. I helped him lift her. She was wrapped in a quilt that had blue stars on it, and I did not look at her face because he asked me not to. We buried her under a cottonwood behind the barn. Roy said a few words. He said she had been a good woman and a stubborn one, and that she had loved him more than he deserved. He said the Lord's Prayer without stumbling. I said it with him where I remembered the words. After, we sat on the porch. He had put on a mask, one of the N95s left over from the fires. I had put one on too, from a box in the Ranger. He drank water from a bottle. He did not offer me any because he did not want me to touch anything he had touched. Karcher, he said, something's moving through here. It's fast. Marlene was fine Monday. She's gone Thursday. I don't know if it's in the water or the air, or if it came in with somebody I don't know about. I want you to go back to your site, and I want you to lock the gate, and I want you to not open it for anybody. I opened it for you. That was Wednesday. This is Friday. It's a different world now. Roy, I mean it. Go back. I asked him if he had anybody to be with. He said his daughter in Nampa, but he hadn't been able to reach her. He asked me if I could try when I got back to the site, if any comms came up. I told him I would. He said if she called or came, to tell her he was all right, and that her mother had loved her, and that he was going to stay at the ranch with the animals until somebody official told him different. I told him I'd check on him every day at 8 and 8. He said don't. He said conserve the batteries. Once a day, he said, at 8 in the morning. And if he didn't answer 3 days in a row, don't come. I told him I couldn't promise that. He said, then you're not as smart as I thought you were. I drove back to the site. I stopped at the abandoned sedan again on the way. I did not know why. I looked in the windows one more time. Everything was exactly as I had left it. I put my hand on the hood. Cold. Whoever she was. She had been gone from that car for at least a night. I got back to the site at 1 in the afternoon. I locked every gate behind me. I walked the perimeter with the shotgun. I checked the equipment building. I checked the trailer. Everything was as I had left it. The radar was turning. The scope was empty. The archive drive was still in my pocket. I dumped the day's data. I sat at the console and I put my head in my hands and I cried for a while. For Marlene, whom I had never met, and for Roy sitting on that porch with a mask on and his hands on his knees, and for the woman in the gray sedan whose coffee had gone cold on the dashboard. Then I made coffee. Then I ate a can of chili. Then I went back to work, because that was the deal. That was what I had signed up for. Not to be a hero, not to save anybody, to keep the radar turning. The rest of that week I settled into a rhythm. It sounds strange to say that when the world was going quiet around me, but that is what happened. Humans are built to make routines out of anything. I made mine out of the site. 6 in the morning, perimeter walk. Check fuel, check water, check propane, check generator hours. Check the horizon for smoke or new columns or new lights. 7. Coffee, breakfast, log entry. 8. Radio call to Roy. 9 through noon. Equipment maintenance. There is always maintenance on a radar site. There are filters to clean and belts to inspect and lubrication points to hit and cabinets to open and dust off and close again. I did more of it than I needed to because it kept my hands busy. Noon. Lunch. A can of something, usually with saltines. 1 through 5. Monitoring. I sat at the console and I watched the empty sweep and I listened to the microwave modem cycle and I logged every attempt. 5. Perimeter walk, same as morning. 6. Dinner. 7 through 9. Reading. There was a small shelf in the trailer with paperbacks that Della and I had accumulated over the years. Louis L'Amour. Tony Hillerman. A Bible that somebody had left with a coffee ring on the cover. A copy of The Grapes of Wrath that I had not read since high school. I read The Grapes of Wrath twice that week. 9. Log entry, buffer dump, radio call to Roy. 10. Sleep in 3-hour stretches until 6. The high aircraft came over 3 more times that week, always at night, always without painting on my scope, twice moving southeast, once moving north. I logged them all. Roy checked in every morning. He was not sick. His animals were fine. He had walked to the neighbor's on Saturday, and the neighbor was not there anymore. The house was empty. The neighbor's dog was on the porch, and Roy had brought it home. He named the dog Ike because he could not remember what the neighbor had called it. Ike sat with Roy on the porch every morning while Roy called in on the radio. On Sunday morning, the 6th day of the ground stop, the microwave link came back up for about 20 minutes. I was refilling the coffee pot when I heard the tone from the modem status panel that meant a handshake had completed. I ran to the console. The link was up. Bit error rate was terrible, but it was up. I sent the archive index to Salt Lake automatically. I picked up the direct line. It rang. It rang. It kept ringing. Nobody answered. I switched to the interphone circuit. I keyed the mic. Salt Lake Center, Kuna radar. Anybody up? Silence. Then a woman's voice. Not Peter's. Not the woman from Tuesday. Someone else. She sounded very young. Kuna, this is Salt Lake. Who am I speaking to? This is Karcher, on-site tech. Who am I speaking to? Ma'am, sorry. Sir, I'm not supposed to give my name. I'm one of 2 people still in the building. I'm not a controller. I'm a data systems technician. Everybody else, I don't know where everybody else is. How long have you been there? Since Wednesday. I stayed. Are you all right? I'm fine. I have food. There's a lot of food here. The generator's running, but the phones aren't working outside the building. Do you have any news? Anything? Sir, I don't. The TV in the break room stopped working Thursday. The internet stopped working Friday. There was an emergency broadcast on the AM radio Saturday morning that said to stay indoors and stay hydrated and wait for further instructions. Nothing since. What was the broadcast? It was the president, or somebody speaking for the president. I don't remember which. He said there had been a serious public health event originating on the West Coast. He said the ground stop was extended indefinitely. He said the National Guard was being federalized in all states. He said to stay indoors and stay hydrated. He said further guidance was coming. There hasn't been any. A public health event? Yes, sir. Do you know what? No, sir. He didn't say. He looked tired. She and I talked for another 10 minutes. I told her about the aircraft I'd been seeing at night. She said she'd seen a note on Peter's desk. Peters had left Thursday to check on his family that said the FAA was tracking military and unmarked flights on a separate system that the civilian scopes were not fed. She said she had access to that system. She said she'd looked at it that morning. She said there had been 14 high-altitude tracks over the western United States in the last 24 hours. 14. Yes, sir. Going where? Mostly out to sea, some to the interior. Some appear to be circling. Circling what? Population centers, sir. Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Salt Lake, Boise. circling Boise. Yes, sir. There's one up right now, in fact. High. It's been up for 6 hours. It's on your screen if you know where to look, but it's flagged out of the civilian display. Can you unflag it? I shouldn't. I understand. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Sir, there's something else. Go ahead. I've been watching the pattern for 3 days. The tracks that are going out to sea, they're all coming back. Coming back. They leave. They fly out 300 miles. They loiter. Then they come back. Same aircraft, best I can tell. Over and over. Like they're going out there and doing something and coming back. Doing what? I don't know, sir. But there's no ships in the water where they're loitering. There's no traffic on the ocean at all. The Coast Guard AIS feed is dead. We were both quiet. The microwave link was hissing behind her voice, and I could hear her breathing, and I could hear, in the background, what sounded like a chair scraping on a floor. Kuna, I have to go. The link is going to drop again in a minute. I can feel it. Sir, please keep your archive drive safe. Please keep recording. If you can get to the archive drive and get it out of that building and get it somewhere safe, please do that. If somebody comes to your site who isn't from your organization, please don't give them the drive. Somebody from DHS was already here. When? Tuesday. Man named Doss. Alan Doss. There was a very long pause. Sir, I don't have anybody named Alan Doss on any list I can see, but my lists might not be complete. Please, just be careful. Understood. I'm going to try to raise you at 0800 tomorrow. If I can't, I'll try again at 2000. If neither works, I'll keep trying. Please stay on your site. I will. The link dropped. The status panel flashed red. The modem started cycling. I sat there for a very long time. I looked at the drive in my pocket. I thought about the man in wire glasses who had shaken my hand and looked at my fuel gauge and told me to save the tapes. I thought about how he had known exactly what to ask for. I thought about how the young woman at Salt Lake did not know his name. I did not know what to do with that. I filed it. I wrote it in the paper log. Salt Lake Data Tech reports no record of Alan Doss on any DHS list she can access. Note, her lists may be incomplete. Note, Doss's ID appeared genuine. Note, he did not ask to see the tapes, only that they be preserved. I underlined the last sentence. That night the high aircraft came over twice. I logged them both. Monday morning, Roy did not check in. I called for him at 8. I called again at 8:15. I called again at 8:30. Nothing. I had told him I could not promise to wait 3 days. I meant it. I waited until 9 because I told myself that was reasonable. And then I loaded the shotgun and I locked the sight and I drove east on the 2-lane again. The gray sedan was still on the shoulder. Nobody had touched it. The ranch was quiet. Roy's F250 was in the drive where it had been. The porch light was on. There was no smoke from the chimney. There was a dog on the porch. Ike. He was lying with his head on his paws and he looked up when the ranger pulled in, but he did not bark. Roy was in the rocking chair on the porch. He had the handheld radio in his lap. His eyes were open. His hand was on Ike's head. He was gone. I do not want to describe what I saw. I will tell you that he was peaceful. I will tell you that there was a glass of water on the little table next to the rocker and it was half full. I will tell you that Ike would not leave the porch and I did not try to make him. I took the radio out of Roy's lap. I turned it off. I put it in my jacket pocket. I sat on the top step of the porch for a long time and I petted Ike and I said out loud, "Roy, I'm so sorry I didn't come yesterday." I buried him next to Marlene. It took me the rest of the day. The ground was harder than it had been Friday. I used the backhoe. I did not know how to run a backhoe well and I broke a hydraulic line before I got it done. I finished with a shovel. I put him in a canvas tarp because that was what I had. I said the Lord's Prayer, and I got it right this time because I had been practicing. I took Ike home with me. I know that sounds like a small thing. It was not a small thing. Ike sat on the passenger seat of the Ranger, and he leaned his head against my shoulder for the whole drive back, and I understood, for the first time in 8 years, why my ex-wife had wanted a dog, and why I had said no. I had been wrong. I had been wrong about a lot of things. We got back to the site at dusk. I dumped the buffer. I fed Ike a can of tuna because that was what I had. I sat on the floor of the equipment room with him, and I told him about my day the way you tell a dog things. He listened. He put his head on my knee. He fell asleep. I did not sleep. The Salt Lake tech came up on the link at 8 the next morning. Her voice was thinner than the day before, but she was still there. I did not tell her about Roy. I told her the site was operational. I told her the drive was safe. She told me the pattern of the flights had not changed. She told me she had 8 days of food left. She told me her name finally, because she said she had decided that if things kept going the way they were going, somebody should know her name. Her name was Priya Menon. She was 26. She was from Sandy, Utah. Her parents lived in Draper. She had not been able to reach them since Thursday. I told her my name was Wes. I told her I was 43 from Boise originally, and that I had a brother in Reno. I had not been able to reach, and that I had a dog now, whose name was Ike, and who had been given to me by a man who had just died. She said she was sorry about the man. I said I was sorry about her parents. We were quiet for a moment on an intermittent microwave link between 2 federal facilities on a continent that had stopped moving. Then we did our jobs. She read me the flight tracks. 2 overnight, 1 still up, circling east of Boise, altitude approximately 50,000 feet, holding a pattern that looked to her like a search grid. I marked it on my paper map with a pencil. She told me she had noticed something new. The flights were coming closer to the population centers than they had been. The circles were tightening. She said she did not know what that meant, but she wanted somebody else to know. I said I would keep the note. She said the link was going to drop, and I said I understood. And she said, before it did, that she thought I should know that the emergency broadcast had said one more thing that she had forgotten to tell me. It had said that the event had originated in a research facility. It had not said where. It had said that there was no cure yet, but that there would be one. It had said to stay indoors and stay hydrated and wait. The link dropped. I sat with Ike at my feet. The next 3 weeks I will tell you about faster because they were, in many ways, the same day repeated with small differences. That is not the story I would put in a movie. It is the story that actually happened. Every morning I walked the perimeter. Every morning the sky was the same. The wind came and went. The smoke to the west thickened and then thinned and then thickened again. Twice I saw the columns of it flatten into a haze that stretched from horizon to horizon, and once, on a Thursday, the sun came up red the way it does in fire season, and I stood outside for a long time and I said, quietly, Priya, if you're seeing this, I hope you're okay. Priya came up on the link every morning at 8 for 11 days. On the 12th day, she did not. On the 13th day, she did not. On the 14th day, the link did not come up at all. I do not know what happened to her. I want to believe that she is somewhere safe with her parents in Draper. I want to believe that the building she was in stayed powered and that she stayed fed and that somebody who mattered came and got her. I want to believe that. I do not know. The high aircraft kept coming over. I logged them. The number went down over time. In the first week, I saw 1 or 2 a night. In the third week, I saw 1 every other night. In the fourth week, I saw 1 on a Sunday at 3 in the morning, moving north. It was the last one I ever saw. Twice more, people came to the site. The first was on the 16th day. A family in a minivan. A man and a woman and 2 teenage kids and a small child. They pulled up to the outer gate, and the man got out with his hands up, and he called through the fence. He said they were from Meridian. He said they had been driving for 2 days and looking for anywhere with power. He said his youngest was asthmatic and needed a nebulizer. He said he could hear my generator from the road, and could I please just let them plug in for an hour and then they would go. I looked at them for a long time through the fence. I looked at the little girl. I thought about Roy on the porch. I thought about Marlene under the cottonwood. I did not let them in. I told them I could not risk letting anybody into the building. I told them there was an outlet on the exterior wall of the trailer that I would run an extension cord to. I told them I would put the extension cord out through the fence and they could plug the nebulizer into it from their van without either of us getting closer than the fence. That is what we did. The little girl used the nebulizer. Her breathing evened out. Her mother cried for a while and did not try to hide it. The man asked me what I knew. I told him what little I knew. I told him about the flights. I told him about Priya. I did not tell him about Roy. He asked me where they should go. I told him I did not know. I told him that I had heard from a data tech in Salt Lake 3 weeks ago that there was food in the building where she was, and that if they could get to Salt Lake, they might find somebody there. I told him I did not know if she was still there. He thanked me. He put the nebulizer back in the van. His wife touched the fence with her fingertips before she got in. She said, "God bless you, sir." They drove east on the 2-lane. I watched them go until they were gone. I do not know what happened to them either. The second was on the 23rd day. It was Alan Doss. He came up the access road the same way he had before. The same dark blue SUV. Same government plates. He looked worse than he had the first time. He was thinner. His windbreaker was dirty. He got out at the gate and he pressed the intercom. "Mr. Karcher, it's Alan Doss. I hope you remember me." "I remember you. I'd like to come in." I did not open the gate. Ike sat at my feet and he growled low in his throat the way he had not growled at anyone else. I put my hand on his head. "Mr. Doss, I've been thinking about our conversation." "Yes, sir." "You told me to save the tapes." "I did." "You told me somebody someday might need them." "I did." "You said you were from DHS Boise field office." "That's right. I've been in touch with Salt Lake Center. They don't have you on any of their lists." He looked at me through the fence. He did not look surprised. He looked tired. "Mr. Karcher, those lists are incomplete. I told you that." "You told me they might be. Not that they were." "May I come in?" "No, sir. I don't think so. Not until I understand better who you are." He nodded slowly. He looked at Ike. He looked at the shotgun that I was holding, not pointed at him, but visible. "Mr. Karcher, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't work for DHS. I work for a different part of the government. I'm not going to tell you which part. I came out here on the first day because we knew this site was going to be one of the few operational long-range radars in this sector, and we needed to make sure the data was being preserved. I lied to you about my agency because it was simpler than telling you the truth, and because I did not know then what I know now." "Which is what?" "Which is that my agency is no longer functional. The chain of command I reported to is gone. I have been driving from site to site for 3 weeks trying to collect the data I asked people like you to save. I have 3 drives in my vehicle. I would like yours. I would like to take it somewhere I believe it will be safe, and I would like to leave it with somebody I believe will be here long after I am not." "Where is that place?" "I don't know yet. I'm still looking." "Mr. Doss, why should I give you the drive?" He was quiet for a long time. "You shouldn't," he said finally. "Not on my word. My word isn't worth anything to you, but I will tell you this. If somebody someday reconstructs what happened in the sky over the American West, in the fall of this year, the only way they will do it is with radar tapes. Every civilian ground station on the West Coast is dark. Most of the FAA facilities are dark. The military tapes will be classified for 50 years, even if there is somebody left to classify them. Your tapes and the tapes from 3 or 4 other sites are all that is left. If you keep them here and this site is not manned in 6 months, they will be corrupted or destroyed by weather or by scavengers or by whoever comes through next. If you give them to me, there is a chance, not a certainty, a chance that they end up somewhere they can be read. And if I keep them, then you become the person who has to protect them for as long as it takes. He looked at me through the fence. I looked at him. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about Priya telling me not to give them to anyone from outside my organization. I thought about the woman in the gray sedan. I thought about the little girl on the nebulizer. I thought about Roy on the porch. I made a decision. It was not, I think, the decision Priya would have wanted. It was not, I think, the decision Doss wanted either. It was mine. Mr. Doss, I'm going to keep the drive, but I'm going to give you a copy. He blinked. A copy. There's a spare drive in my equipment room. I can dump the archive to it. It will take about 4 hours. You are welcome to wait outside the fence. I will slide it through to you when it is done. You go your way. I stay here. If you get the copy somewhere safe, that is one path. If I stay here and the site stays up, that is another path. 2 chances are better than 1. He looked at me for a long moment. Then, for the first time since I had met him, he smiled a little. Mr. Karcher, you should have worked for us. I did work for you, Mr. Doss, in a manner of speaking. I dumped the archive. It took 4 hours and 11 minutes. I slid the drive through the fence in a small padded envelope. He took it. He put it in his SUV. He shook my hand through the chain link. If I make it, he said, I will come back and tell you. If you don't, I will keep the original safe. I know you will. He drove away west on the 2-lane toward the smoke. I never saw him again. I do not know if he made it. I want to believe that somewhere, in a records office or a university archive or a vault somewhere, there is a drive with about 6 weeks of ARSR-4 data from a site outside Kuna, and that someday somebody will read it and understand a little more about what happened in the sky over the American West in the fall when everything stopped. I do not know. I stayed at the site for another 11 days after Doss left. The fuel got down to about 30%. The food in the trailer got down to about 10 days. The microwave link never came back. The satellite never came back. The phones never came back. The high aircraft did not come over anymore. On the last day, I did my last perimeter walk. I did my last log entry. I dumped the buffer one last time. I secured the equipment room. I chained the gate. I left a note on the door of the trailer that said in block letters, radar operational as of this date. Fuel low. Drive in lockbox under console. Code 41172. W. Karcher. I did not know who would read that. I did not know if anyone would. I loaded the Ranger with what I could carry. I put Ike on the passenger seat. I took the archive drive in the waterproof case in my jacket pocket. I took the shotgun. I took the paper log. I took the stay/go list from Tuesday of the first week, which was still folded in my shirt pocket, and which I had not looked at since I made it. I drove east. I passed the gray sedan. It was still there. Grass had started to grow up around the tires. I passed Roy's ranch. I did not stop. I could not. I drove all the way to Mountain Home before I ran out of fuel. The town was quiet. There were people there. Not many. A woman in a Red Cross vest waved me down at what had been a school, and she took me in, and she fed me, and Ike, and she told me that the government was consolidating survivors in a corridor along the interstate, and that there was a place in Twin Falls where they were doing intake, and that if I could get there, they would find me a bed. I asked her what had happened. She told me what she had been told, which was not much more than what Priya had told me weeks before. A pathogen, originating on the coast. Airborne for the first week, then not. A response that had not been fast enough. A quarantine that had been implemented too late and lifted too early. a recovery that was going to be measured in years, not months. I asked her about Boise. She said Boise was still standing. She said the death toll there had been high, but not total. She said they were rebuilding a hospital. I asked her about Della Reyes. I gave her the name. I gave her the husband's name and the daughter's name. She said she would ask around. She said sometimes people got found this way and sometimes they didn't. She did find Della 3 months later. Della was alive. Ryan was alive. The 2-year-old, whose name was Sophie, was not. That is the sentence I have written and rewritten 100 times, and I still do not know how to say it right. Sophie was not. Della and I still talk. She lives in Nampa now. She works for the state in a job that has nothing to do with radars. She does not want to talk about the site. I understand that. I do not know what happened to Priya. I do not know what happened to Alan Doss. I do not know what happened to the family in the minivan with the little girl and the nebulizer. I do know that the archive drive that was in my jacket pocket that day is now in a safe deposit box in a bank in Twin Falls, and that a copy of it has been given to a professor at Boise State who studies the history of American infrastructure, and that she has told me, very carefully, that when she opened the drive and ran the playback, she cried. She would not tell me why. She said it was because of the silence. She said she had never seen a radar tape with that much silence on it in her life. I still have Ike. He is old now. He sleeps most of the day. He follows me from room to room in a small house in Nampa, 3 blocks from Della's, and he does not like it when I leave. I understand that too. I did not save anybody in the way that phrase usually means. I did not lead a convoy out of a burning city. I did not restore power to a hospital. I did not carry a child across a river. I ran a radar site outside Kuna for 6 weeks after everything stopped. And I kept the sweep painting an empty sky, and I saved the tapes. Somebody asked me once, years later, whether I thought that had mattered, whether the tapes had mattered, whether standing at a scope for 6 weeks watching nothing had been worth it. I told them what I have come to believe, which is that the world does not always let you know whether what you did mattered. Sometimes you find out. Sometimes somebody comes back and tells you. And sometimes you do the job because it is the job. And you keep the sweep painting because the sweep is what you were given to keep. And somewhere in a bank vault in Twin Falls there is a drive that will either be read one day or it will not. And either way, you did the thing you were there to do. That is not a heroic answer. I know that. It is the only honest one I have. The morning I left the site for the last time, I stood outside the equipment building and I listened for a long time. The wind was from the west. There was no smoke that day. The sky was clear. The radome was turning above me, slow and steady, the way it had turned every minute of every day since I had gotten there. I could not hear the interstate. I could not hear an engine anywhere in any direction, but I could hear, faintly, the low, steady grind of the pedestal drive, and I could hear Ike breathing at my feet, and I could hear my own boots on the gravel when I shifted my weight, and I stood there for a minute and I thought, this is what a working site sounds like when there is nobody left to work it. Then I got in the Ranger. Then I drove east. The radar was still turning when I left. I like to think it turned for a while longer after I was gone. I like to think that on some quiet afternoon in the following spring, when the fuel finally ran out, the antenna slowed to a stop with its face pointed at some random bearing across the sagebrush, and that it stayed that way, patient in the wind. I do not know if it did. I like to think it.